Today's episode of Filmmaker U is brought to you by our sponsors OWC. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking and computer needs. And it's also brought to you by our other sponsors, AJA. Make sure to check out aja.com so that you can see how they can help you in your post-production needs. Hi, I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com or, of course, follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. Every week, we interview film professionals to discuss their work, and this week I'm joined by Nena Erb, whose work includes Insecure, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, and HBO's Generation, just to name a few. Welcome to the show, Nena.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thank you.
I have to say, I read your bio, and it's my favorite bio I've had to read because it's a little story. Because it starts off with your parents and then it ends with that, like, resolves that little issue at the end. Was this intentional? Like, were you sitting there being like, I need to create a story for this, or did it just happen? How did that happen?
You know, a lot of people were like, give me your bio, give me your bio. And I'm like, I don't know how to write a bio. And I didn't want it to just be like a list of credits because I thought that was boring. So I was like, well, a bio is kind of about you, right? So I'll just tell them about myself. And that's kind of where I started. It's like, well, this is, I'm an immigrant. My parents did not want me to go into the business. So, and yet I did.
Yeah. You set up the conflict, resolved it at the end. No, it was great. Now, in it, you mentioned that you went to art school and you wanted to be Andy Warhol. What was it about Andy Warhol that you wanted to be? You wanted to replicate or do?
You know, it just from like 3 or 4 years old, I just wanted to create. You know, my parents, of course, forced me taking piano lessons and flute lessons and violin lessons. But I really liked drawing, painting, photography. And I really latched on to Andy Warhol because he was kind of not defined by a medium. He did it all. He just kind of was like, all right, I feel like making a film right now about a big toe, you know, or like he just did whatever he wanted. And I just thought that was so liberating. And so, you know, of course, strict parents, I was like, I want to be him.
I'm going to interrupt this interview for 1 second. We want to thank PixelView, one of our sponsors. They're a streaming solution for filmmakers. PixelView lets you stream your work to remote clients for easy collaboration, and it works with both on-set teams and post-production teams. With built-in video chat, you can discuss and make changes in real time and stream directly from your editing software. Or you can use the hardware encoder to stream from DaVinci Resolve or the camera on set. See the promo code and the link in the video description below. How did you transition from Andy Warhol into the film industry?
It was definitely an accident. You know, I went to art school, came out, was completely unemployed, and didn't know what I wanted to do. A lot of people were like, well, why don't you go back to school, get your master's, start teaching? And I thought, well, that's not very interesting. I don't really want to teach, never have wanted to teach. So, you know, I kind of looked around and my friend's like, hey, come work with me on, you know, in the art department. And I thought, okay, art school, art department, yeah. Should go together, but it kind of didn't. I mean, I loved my experience there, and I loved like the energy on set and how hard everybody worked just to create this environment, you know, for the actors. But it felt very much like architecture, more than just like creating something out of, you know, nothing. I mean, they are also creating something out of nothing, but yeah, that was very much like set decorating, architecture. And it didn't really, I wasn't fully fulfilled. So I just kept looking, bounced around a lot. I was a set PA, I was a second AD at one point. And I think I became a script supervisor for probably the longest time. And I entered Oxygen Network when they were launching in 2000. And it was like the sky was the limit. You know, it was so new. They didn't have enough people for everything. So everyone just kind of like did whatever they could to make it happen. And I remember one day, you know, the director couldn't be in the edit bay anymore. And so they're like, well, why don't you go in there? Because everybody likes you and gets along with you. So we'll send you in there with a bunch of notes and then you'll do it. Great. the only thing was like, I think you had to either be a director, an AD, or like a producer to work with an editor. So they made me an associate producer, and I went in there, and the editor I was working with completely changed my life. He showed me kind of like how you can put a story together, and just by like changing the angle of a cut, you can completely change the meaning and change someone's POV. And so my mind was just like blown. And I just thought that was the coolest thing in the world. So I was like, okay, well, this is really cool because it deals with images, it deals with storytelling. It's like all things I love. So yeah, after I was done as an associate producer, I learned how to use the Avid, and he hired me to be his assistant. And
The rest
many
is history.
exactly.
So how do you like to approach your cuts when you're starting a project? You've worked on these big shows like Insecure and Crazy Ex-Girlfriend and Generation. So, you're starting this project. How do you like to sort of get into it? How do you like to start to, I guess, build your first cut?
I have kind of a wild process. I read the script many times, and then when I'm, they shoot everything out of order. So morning of, I'll say, okay, which scenes do I have? It's 14, 27, 39, whatever, and I'll read those scenes. Again, really paying extra attention to all the screen direction that's in between the dialogue, because that really informs like the tone that people are going for or the writers are going for. So I do that, and then I watch everything, like from the moment they put the slate in, and then action, and then all the way till they cut the camera. And sometimes, and I don't know if this is a trend, but I'm seeing it a lot more in the last few years. Directors tend to not yell cut. They'll just say, all right, let's pause and do a reset. And I think it's because so they can get in another take quicker. And I find that, if I listen to what they're saying, it's really helpful. And also, oftentimes I've found great reactions from the actors in those resets, one has actually really bailed me out in a really tough situation where like there was a joke, but there was no reaction. And so I was like, oh, well, if one of them doesn't react, this completely just doesn't land. So there it was. An actor was listening to the director, and it looked like he was kind of like going, reacting to the joke, but really he was just listening. So, so I used it. So that's part of my process. And the other thing that makes it really labor intensive is like, I like to do multiple versions of everything. So I'll either, I'll find different ways to get into a scene, get out of a scene. And sometimes I'll have, maybe multiple performances I'm kind of not sure about. So I'll have a version with that one performance and another, and then I kind of take a look. And if I'm just really not satisfied with the scene, if I'm just not feeling the emotion I'm supposed to be feeling, I will start recutting it either from the end to the front or just completely changing the POV of the character, even though it's not supposed to be from that character's point of view, just to see like, what am I missing, So yeah, it's kind of, I have a strange process.
Well, it's fascinating because I talked to someone recently who said that they do the one cut for the director, and then if they have the time, they do a bunch of different alts, so that if the director's like, it's not working for me, like, well, I have this other idea, they can just pop in the scene. So it's fascinating that you also sort of take on that approach. Now, you also mentioned going through the script. Do you make notes in the script, or like what's your script reading process?
Yeah, I do make notes. I often there are questions that I will ask during the tone meeting. Like, okay, I think this character could potentially take this in two different directions. So I just want to make sure it's correct. Like, is she really being honest about it, or is she kind of covering? Those are the kind of questions that I will ask. And yeah, I do that. And then sometimes if I think of a music cue that comes up or a song, I'll jot that down. But yeah, mostly it's just about like, questions I have, music, ideas. Occasionally I'll ask about like, okay, are we seeing this texting exchange on screen? Are we seeing it, is it going to be an over the shoulder insert of the phone? I mean, there are a lot more technical questions, just because I feel like I go with my gut a lot oftentimes when I'm looking at daily. I tend to ask less. I don't make notes on the performance questions, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Do you because like you've also worked in reality, you've worked in docs, you worked in fiction. So like, is there things that you learned? Because when I talk to doc editors, it's like, oh, we got 300 hours of footage for a 2-minute scene or something crazy. And you have to weed that down. But is there something from that skill set of working in docs and reality that you use in your fiction work now?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I think in nonfiction, you oftentimes are the editor, you're the story producer, you're the music editor, you're the VFX editor. And so I think all those skills have really helped me really polish my editor's cut so that it looks like it could, ideally it could air if I were to die the next day, So that's kind of like a method that I've taken with me from one job
Yeah.
to the other. And also the other thing is like just having had so many years, like you said, having to wade through all those hours of material, it's really made me much more efficient at looking at shots. Like
Mhm.
I can immediately like see the white picture and I was like, okay, well that's not working because like the hair is like a little wrong, or I can spot those things a lot quicker. I'm not
Mhm.
even sure how that related from that, but I guess it's just from like looking at a lot of stuff for a long time, all day long.
Well, and so, we talked about like the tone meeting, but for shows like Insecure and all those, how do you get on the same page as the showrunner or the creator to make sure you're in that sort of headspace when you're creating your cuts?
Oh gosh. Well, for Insecure, it was a little easier. I joined them in season 3.
Hmm.
So the characters were kind of already established, and I had watched the show season 1 and 2. So I was familiar with their story arcs and their personal journey. And tone meetings are tremendously helpful because they'll often talk about where the character is at a specific point in the episode. And so that's really, really helpful for me to get on the same page. Every once in a while, I'll see a performance that really surprises me that I really love. And so those are kind of like the alts.
Hmm.
If I love that one, even though I don't think it quite fits into what we talked about in the tone meeting, So there's in season 3, actually, there was an episode that was completely inside Issa's head. And I had 2 completely different versions cut for that, like completely different. One was like how I thought, like what the approach was like, okay, how do I make this look like the show, right? Because
Yeah,
it
yeah.
really strange tone. It was like slightly horror, so kind of not. And so I did it exactly to the kind of style and the signature, marks of the show. And then I kind of thought, it's not really putting me in her point of view.
Hmm.
And I kept looking at it, trying to figure out why. And I think it was because we were seeing all of her internet stalking, her social media stalking, like next to her face, right on the screen.
Hmm.
And I thought, well, okay, well, whose point of view is that? It's not hers, it's the viewers, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I completely changed that idea. And, I couldn't tell him to shoot it over her shoulder. But what I did was I had my assistant recreate like an Instagram page or, a text or something. And she managed to do it in such a high resolution. I basically used it like it was shot that way. So I could like really kind of like go from her face to a full screen of the Instagram,
Wow.
animate it so you see her scrolling and clicking on things and then like pushing in on it even more when she sees the pictures that she's reacting to. So it really allowed me a lot of more creative freedom to like put the viewer in her mind and her point of view.
Hmm.
And yeah, I just remember thinking like, this is nothing like the show. I was like, well, it's my first season, it's my last episode.
Yeah,
They're either gonna love it or they're gonna fire me. And if they fire me, I'm done.
yeah.
Like I finished up the first season with them. So, but they ended up loving it. So it worked out really, really well.
What would you, and I hate using this word, but you mentioned you mentioned using the in between the resets, and you mentioned this. Is there a particular cheat in your career that you're like, oh, I love that cheat. I can't believe, people haven't noticed it or anything like that?
Oh, yes.
Now, are
They're
you willing to
funny.
tell us? Because then people will know about it.
I think so. I think so. There's always cheats, right? In
Yeah.
any editor's career, and I think this one I'm particularly proud that I was able to pull it off because I honestly didn't think I could. It was my final episode on Insecure, the Mira Issa scene at the end of episode 8, where she's kind of like pacing back and forth in front of the mirror and she's talking to herself, and the whole thing is a oneer, right?
Mhm.
And so with the oneer, they shot it on the same day, so she couldn't see her previous performances played back for her to react to for timing. So it was impossible for, I don't care how good the actor is. It's not humanly possible if you can't see it on playback.
Yeah.
So the pacing was never going to line up. And initially, the director called me the night before and was like, "Hey, so we shot something kind of differently today, and I think it's going to be really cool if it works. So why don't you cut that first thing in the morning and let me know if it worked?" And I remember looking at that going, I don't know. Like, I layered it on top of one another,
Yeah.
and like they would either be talking at the same time, or like the reaction would be before the the statement, or be
Yeah.
really long pause after the statement. So it's like, well, this is going to be interesting. So then what I figured out was like, okay, I basically found places where real Issa, as she was passing back and forth, moments that could slow her down without it being visible to the human eye. And then when she sat down, it was also the same thing. Like I was able to slow her down so that it looked like she was listening to near Issa, and then speed her up really fast and quickly so she would react, turn her head and say something. And so the entire scene, the pacing was completely manipulated.
Wow.
I'm to this day, I'm still surprised I was able to carry it off. But really, I mean, the credit has to go to the VFX team, though, because I did a temp, and they really kind of made it elevated to the next level.
They're like, we'll take it from here.
Yeah, it was a multi-step process.
Well, now is there, because you've worked, like I said, you've worked in documentaries, reality. Is there a genre or a style of television or filmmaking that you want to get into?
Oh gosh, I'd love to do more dramas and limited series. I've been very fortunate to be in the comedy / drama genre, I guess. And I just finished a movie like not too long ago. I think we were talking about that, or I was with Jason, and I don't think the format matters.
Yeah.
For me, I think I'm happiest in the comedy drama realm, but I would love to try some drama.
Interesting. Well, it's funny because like the format so doesn't matter because everything's gone. Like television is, it's changed so dramatically from when I was young, right? Like growing up watching Friends and stuff like that is a little different than, Breaking Bad and Insecure and like all these shows that have come out now. So
Yeah.
now, is there a particular scene, you've been nominated for Emmys and you've won Emmys. Is there a particular scene that you're really proud of that wasn't in the Emmy nomination or win that you think people should check out?
There's an episode of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. I'm trying to remember what number it was now, and I can't. It's been a few years, so I don't remember. But it's the one where where Rachel Bloom's character decides, to kind of accept her mental diagnosis. And the entire episode is fascinating because it really follows her kind of realizing and kind of like spinning out of control, realizing it, and then like accepting it. And I know that one of the things that was really important to the creators of that series was that we portray mental illness in a very honest way, but it still had to be funny, but yet without making fun of them. And so it was quite a challenge to just kind of find the right balance and tone and believability, I guess, authenticity for that episode. And I think I'm really happy with the way it turned out and what I love, and this is, I hope I don't sound like an evil person, but I love that everybody that's watched the episode cried at the end. So
Now you sort of touched on this a few times, and it's like sort of the emotions or the tone of a scene. But I think about like the underlying emotions for the characters. And I don't even know how to ask this, but like how do you like to work with that, or how do you like to mold that in the cutting process? I don't know if that's a good question, but I'll toss it out there.
yeah, that's an interesting question. I think it just comes from understanding what they're supposed to be feeling at a particular point
Hmm.
in the story, in the episode, or in the movie, or what have you. And then trying to find the performances that fit that, or cutting it in a way that really accentuates it. Like if you really want to see, for example, like if I wanted to stay on a character for a long time, to see them receive a certain news and see them changing and see how it
Hmm.
affects them, that would be one way to convey what they're feeling at the time. Another way to do it is maybe on the movie I just watched, Downtown Owl. The teacher comes to town and she's meeting all these people and she's very overwhelmed, so it was like, oh great, well the director shot some slow-mo stuff, that's kind of fun. And then so what we came up with was, having her kind of walk down a hall as she's meeting everybody. You don't really see the principal that's introducing her
Hmm.
class load or the people. You just hear them talking and you kind of see her looking at the kids, and the kids are in slow motion staring back at her. And then the voices start to kind of like echo in her head, because at that point it really doesn't matter what he's
Hmm.
saying. She's just like, oh my god, this is like a lot, right? And then at a certain point, there's a group of kids that come across that kind of pull her out of it. So there's just kind of, I guess it varies, but
Yeah, yeah.
I try to come up with something interesting for everything.
Now I have one last question for you. What would you say is your favorite guilty pleasure film or TV show to watch?
Oh gosh, I love My Cousin Vinny.
It's a great film.
It's so funny, and Raising Arizona is another one.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just whenever those come on, I could just sit down and watch it, and it's
Yeah.
funny every time.
That's what I usually tell people when they're like, "Oh, what do you mean by guilty pleasure?" I'm like, you're flipping the channels on Sunday, and for whatever reason, TBS is still running that same movie, but you're like, you know what? I'll watch it again. So,
Yeah.
well, thank you so much for letting me interview you today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks. And that's it for this week. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com, or of course, follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. I'm Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching. Today's episode of Filmmaker U is brought to you by our sponsors, OWC. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking and computer needs. And it's also brought to you by our other sponsors, AJA. Make sure to check out aja.com so that you can see how they can help you in your post-production needs.